This story is fictional and does not endorse criminal activity or violence. All events and characters are products of imagination. Criminal choices have severe real-world consequences, including prison, loss of freedom, and irreparable harm to victims and families. If you or someone you know is struggling with violence or criminal behavior, please seek help. National Crisis Hotline, 988. They say pride comes before the fall. They're wrong. Pride doesn't come before anything. It blinds you so completely that you never see the fall coming at all. Victor Brennan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, 40 stories above Chicago's North Side, watching the city pulse with evening traffic. From up here, the people looked like insects. Tiny, insignificant, disposable. He liked that perspective. It reminded him of what he'd become, what he'd built. An empire that stretched from the shipping docks to the construction unions, from the legitimate facade of Brennan Industries to the shadow networks that really moved money in this city. 20 years of work. 20 years of clawing his way up from the South Side projects where he'd grown up with nothing. Where his old man drank himself to death in a studio apartment that smelled like failure and cigarettes. Victor was 48 now, old enough to have scars that ached when it rained, old enough to remember when he had principles. The Army had given him those. 6 years as a ranger, sergeant. Iraq back in the early days when they still thought it would be quick and clean. He'd learned discipline there, learned how to lead men, learned that the world respected strength and punished weakness. He'd also learned that the real money wasn't in serving your country, it was in serving yourself. The dishonorable discharge came in 2006. Black market arms dealing, small stuff at first, selling excess ammunition to Iraqi militias, then bigger shipments, weapons that ended up in the wrong hands. They caught him before it got too bad, but the damage was done, dishonorably discharged. No pension, no honor, no future in the legitimate world. So he'd built an illegitimate one instead. He sipped his whiskey. Macallan, 30 years old, the bottle cost more than most people made in a month. The amber liquid burned going down, but it was a good burn. The kind that reminded you that you were alive, that you'd won. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened glass. 6'2", still broad across the shoulders even if age was starting to soften the edges. Salt and pepper hair cut military short. A scar running along his jawline from a knife fight 10 years back, barely visible now but still there when he looked close enough. Tattoos crawled up his forearms. Army Ranger tab on his left shoulder. The word King across the knuckles of his right hand. He'd gotten that one 5 years ago, after he'd consolidated his hold on the North Side. After everyone stopped questioning who ran things. The city spread out below him like a chessboard, and he was the only player who mattered. Behind him, the penthouse door opened. Victor didn't turn. He knew the footsteps. Heavy, hesitant, someone who didn't want to be here. Mr. Brennan, the voice cracked slightly, young, nervous. Victor turned slowly, deliberately. Let the silence stretch. Let the fear build. The man standing in his living room was maybe 30, short, sweating despite the air conditioning. One of his mid-level guys. Victor couldn't remember his name. Didn't care to. "You're late." Victor's voice was flat. No anger, just observation. Somehow that was worse. I'm sorry, sir. The traffic on Lake Shore was. "I don't accept excuses." Victor crossed the room, each footstep deliberate on the marble floor. "I accept results or resignations. Which are you offering?" The man's throat worked. "The shipment from Milwaukee, it got intercepted." Intercepted. Police checkpoint, random stop. They searched the truck. "How much did we lose?" 40,000 in product, the truck, and Marco got arrested. Victor absorbed this. 40,000, not catastrophic, but not nothing either. More importantly, it was a sign of sloppiness, weakness, and weakness spread like cancer if you didn't cut it out immediately. Who planned the route? The man hesitated. Fatal mistake. You did. Victor didn't make it a question. Yes, sir, but the checkpoint wasn't on the usual. Stop. Victor held up one hand. Do you know what I learned in the army? Planning for contingencies. You plan for the route. You plan for the backup route. You plan for the police. You plan for everything that could go wrong. Because if you don't plan, men die. He paused. Or in this case, product gets seized and I lose money. Mr. Brennan, please, I can fix this. I can. You're fired. The man's face went white. You can't. I have a family. Then you should have done your job better. Victor turned back to the window. Tyler will escort you out, and make sure he understands that discretion is a permanent requirement. From the shadows near the door, another man stepped forward. Tyler James Reeves. Everyone called him TJ, 26 years old, fresh out of the Marines 3 years ago. Lance Corporal. Infantry. Iraq. Victor had recruited him personally. Saw the potential, the hunger, the willingness to do what needed doing. TJ was everything Victor had been at that age. Sharp, loyal, unquestioning. TJ was also smarter than he let on. Victor had started to notice that. The way TJ sometimes hesitated before following orders. The questions in his eyes even when his mouth stayed shut. It was worth watching. But for now, TJ was useful. Come on. TJ's hand fell on the fired man's shoulder, not gentle. Let's go. The man looked back at Victor one more time. Desperate. Pleading. Victor didn't look up from his phone. The conversation was over. The man had stopped existing the moment Victor decided he was disposable. The door closed. Silence returned. Victor finished his whiskey and poured another. This was what power felt like. The ability to erase someone from your world with a few words, to reshape reality according to your will. He'd spent years building this, years crushing anyone who stood in his way, and he'd do it again. Forever, if necessary. His phone buzzed, text from one of his lieutenants. A name Victor actually remembered, Frank Castellano, old school, 58. Been in the business since the 70s. Good at logistics. Better at keeping his mouth shut. Meeting tomorrow, 800, South Docks. Problem with Russians. Victor typed back, handle it. Frank's reply came immediately. Need your call on this one. Victor frowned. Frank didn't ask for help unless something was genuinely complicated, which meant the Russians were pushing again. Alexei Sokolov, former Spetsnaz, arms dealer, psychopath with a ledger. Victor had stolen a shipment from him 2 years back, 10 million in weapons, sold them to a Mexican cartel for 15. Good business. Except Alexei was the type who held grudges. The kind of man who'd burn down a city to make a point. Fine, Victor texted back, 800. He set the phone down and looked out over the city again. Somewhere down there, people were living normal lives, going to jobs they hated, coming home to families that disappointed them, watching television until they fell asleep and woke up to do it all again. Victor had escaped that. He'd chosen power over comfort, fear over love, and he'd never regretted it. Not once. Across the city, in a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered and died, and no one bothered to fix them, Dr. Elena Cruz was elbows deep in a man's abdomen, trying to stop him from bleeding out on a folding table that had seen better days. Clamp! Her voice was steady, always steady, even when her hands wanted to shake, even when the nightmares from Kabul tried to crawl up her spine and remind her of the last time she'd worked like this. In the dirt, under fire, while children screamed and the world ended around her. The young woman assisting her, Maria, handed over the clamp with shaking hands. She was new, 18, wanted to be a nurse but couldn't afford school. Elena had hired her anyway, taught her the basics, enough to be useful in situations like this. Good, Elena worked quickly. The bullet had torn through the man's intestines, Not fatal if she worked fast enough, fatal if she didn't. Suture. The man on the table was maybe 22. Gang tattoos crawled up his neck. He'd been shot 3 blocks from here. His friends had carried him through the door of her clinic 40 minutes ago. Bleeding, screaming, begging her to save him. She hadn't asked questions, hadn't called the police, just pointed at the table and started working. This was the 6th gunshot wound she'd treated this month. It was only the 18th. The free clinic occupied the ground floor of an old warehouse in South Chicago, the neighborhood where ambulances took 30 minutes to arrive, where hospitals asked for insurance cards before they asked about symptoms, where people died because poverty was a pre-existing condition. Elena had opened the clinic 2 years ago with money she didn't have and a determination that surprised even her. She'd mortgaged everything: her car, her savings, the small inheritance from her parents. All of it went into medical equipment, supplies, and the deposits required to keep the electricity running. She was 36 years old. She looked 50. Gray streaked her dark hair even though she tied it back so tight every day that her scalp ached. Dark circles lived permanently under her eyes. She'd lost 20 pounds since leaving the Navy. Not from trying, just from forgetting to eat. From working 18-hour days and collapsing into a cot in the back room until the nightmares woke her up again. Dr. Elena Cruz, Chief Hospital Corpsman, retired, Navy SEAL Team 3, 14 years of service, 5 combat deployments, 89 lives saved in the field, documented, verified. More if you counted the ones she'd pulled through in surgery. More still if you counted the ones she'd talked down from rooftops after they came home and couldn't remember how to live in a world that didn't shoot back. The medical discharge came in 2023. Severe PTSD. She'd watched a suicide bomber walk into a crowd of children during the Kabul evacuation. Watched the explosion, watched the aftermath. Spent 6 hours trying to save kids whose bodies were more gone than there. Failed. Watched them die. Came home, couldn't sleep. Couldn't function. The Navy gave her an honorable discharge, a handshake, and a phone number for the VA mental health line. She'd called it once. Waited on hold for 45 minutes. Hung up, never called again. Now she saved lives here, in this clinic, with equipment that was 10 years out of date and supplies she bought with money she didn't have. Because the oath she'd taken didn't have an expiration date. First, do no harm. She'd meant it then. She meant it now. His pressure's dropping. Maria's voice cracked with fear. Elena checked the monitor. The young woman was right. He was crashing. She worked faster, tied off the bleeder, checked for other damage, found it. Another tear, smaller, repairable. She worked in silence, her world narrowing to the task in front of her. The anatomy, the problem, the solution, everything else fell away. The smell of blood and antiseptic. The flickering fluorescent light overhead. The sound of traffic outside. Gone, just the work, just the mission. Save this life. 20 minutes later, the man's vitals stabilized. Elena stepped back, pulling off her gloves. Blood smeared her scrubs, more blood than she'd wanted to see today, but he'd live. Keep him monitored, she told Maria. Vitals every 15 minutes for the next 2 hours. If anything changes, you call me immediately. Maria nodded, eyes wide. Doc, why do you do this? Do what? Save people like him. He's gang. Probably shot someone. Probably deserved what happened. Elena looked at the unconscious man on the table. Someone's son. Someone's brother. Maybe someone's father. Covered in tattoos that told a story of choices made and roads taken. She didn't know his story. Didn't need to. I took an oath. Her voice was quiet, tired. Everyone's somebody, and I don't get to choose who deserves to live. She walked to the small bathroom at the back of the clinic, washed her hands, looked at herself in the cracked mirror. 5'6", lean in the way people got when they forgot to take care of themselves. Scars on her arms, some from combat, some from the clinic working with equipment that broke and cut and failed at the worst times. She still wore her dog tags, always. The names stamped into the metal were faces she saw every time she closed her eyes. Rodriguez, Chen, Matsumoto, Williams. Her SEAL team, dead in Kabul, all of them except her. Survivor's guilt was a strange thing. It convinced you that you'd failed even when you'd done everything right. Even when you'd held pressure on wounds that wouldn't stop bleeding and breathed air into lungs that wouldn't fill and screamed for medevac that arrived too late. Even when the explosion was so sudden that there was nothing anyone could have done. Guilt didn't care about logic. It just lived in your chest like a stone and reminded you that you were still breathing and they weren't. Her phone buzzed. Text from a number she didn't recognize. She almost deleted it, then read it. Dr. Cruz, this is Agent Diane Walsh, FBI. We need to talk. It's about your clinic and some of the patients you've been treating. Call me. Elena stared at the message. FBI, of course. She'd known this would happen eventually. You couldn't run a clinic in this neighborhood without treating people the authorities wanted to talk to. People who'd been shot, stabbed, beaten, people with warrants. People who were evidence of crimes she didn't want to know about. She treated them anyway, hadn't reported them, hadn't asked questions, just done her job. She deleted the message, didn't call back. Whatever the FBI wanted, it could wait. Outside, Chicago descended into Friday night. The bars filled, the clubs opened. The streets came alive with people looking for something they'd never find. Elena locked the clinic door, checked on the gunshot patient one more time, and climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment above the clinic. One room, kitchenette, bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, cot in the corner. This was home. This was enough. She made coffee she wouldn't drink and sat by the window, watching the street below. A year ago, she'd tried therapy. The therapist had asked her what she wanted, what would make her happy. Elena hadn't known how to answer. Happiness felt like a language she used to speak but had forgotten. Now she just wanted to get through the day without the nightmares, without seeing Rodriguez's face, without hearing the explosion, without smelling the smoke. Small goals. At 2:47 in the morning, Victor Brennan's world ended, and he didn't even realize it. He'd spent the evening at a business dinner. Legitimate associates, real estate developers, city contractors, people who needed his connections and pretended not to know where the money came from. The food was overpriced. The wine was excellent. The conversation was boring. Victor had smiled and nodded and played the role of legitimate businessman while his mind calculated percentages and margins, and who needed to be reminded that late payments had consequences. He'd come home to the penthouse alone, poured another whiskey, checked his messages, responded to 3, ignored 12, took a shower hot enough to make his skin red. He was toweling off when the pain hit. Sudden, catastrophic, like someone had reached into his abdomen and twisted everything at once. Victor's knees buckled. He grabbed the counter, held on. The pain didn't stop. If anything, it got worse, sharp, tearing, radiating from his gut up into his chest. His vision grayed at the edges. Sweat broke out across his forehead. He managed to stumble to the bedroom, grabbed his phone, tried to dial, dropped it. The pain was everything now, a white-hot agony that made thinking impossible. He collapsed onto the bed, curling around the source of the pain. His abdomen felt wrong, swollen, hard. Something was very badly broken inside him. He tried to call out. No sound came, the room spun. He was going to pass out, or die, or both. The bedroom door crashed open. TJ stood there, gun drawn, looking for a threat. Instead, he found Victor on the bed, pale and sweating and clearly dying. "Boss," TJ was at his side in seconds. "What happened? Were you shot?" Victor tried to speak, managed 2 words. "Get, doctor." "I'm calling 911. "No." Victor grabbed TJ's wrist with strength he didn't know he still had. "No hospitals. FBI watching." "You're dying." "Private doctor," each word cost him. "Now." TJ hesitated. Victor could see the conflict in the younger man's eyes. Training versus loyalty. Logic versus orders. For a long moment, TJ just stared at him. Then he pulled out his phone. "I know someone." TJ's voice was tight. "Southside, combat medic, former SEAL. She runs a clinic off the grid." "Get her." "She won't come willingly. She doesn't work for people like us." Victor's vision was tunneling now. The pain had reached a level where his brain was starting to shut down non-essential functions, like consciousness, like caring. "Don't care," he forced the words out. "Get her here, whatever it takes." TJ stood, made a call. Victor heard fragments. Someone named Elena, medical emergency, need you now, can't explain. Then TJ's voice changed, hardened, became the Marine he'd been before Victor had corrupted him into something else. "I'm not asking, Doc. I'm telling you. My boss is dying. You're the only one who can save him. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Be ready." Victor wanted to say something, wanted to tell TJ that threatening a doctor was stupid, that you didn't kidnap people, you paid them, that there were better ways, but the words wouldn't come. The pain was too big, too complete. He closed his eyes and fell into darkness that felt a lot like dying. He woke to voices, TJ's, another one, female, angry. "You can't just kidnap me." "I just did. And if you want to report it after, fine. But right now, he's dying and you're the only person who can stop it. Call 911. He's a person of interest to the FBI. Hospitals are monitored. You want him to die while they process his arrest warrant." A pause. Then the female voice again, quieter now, resigned. "What's wrong with him?" "Don't know, collapsed an hour ago. Severe abdominal pain. Sweating, couldn't speak." Could be a dozen things, all of them bad. Victor forced his eyes open. The room swam into focus. TJ stood near the door. Next to him was a woman, small, maybe 5.5 feet. Dark hair pulled back tight, wearing scrubs that had seen too many shifts. She carried a medical bag that looked like it had been through a war. When she turned to look at him, her eyes were the color of coffee and just as bitter. Dr. Elena Cruz, the woman who was about to save his life and ruin everything he'd built. She approached the bed, professional, detached, pulled on gloves from her bag. "I'm going to examine you, tell me where it hurts." Victor tried to gesture, managed to move one hand toward his abdomen. Elena's hands were gentle but thorough. She pressed carefully, watching his face for reactions. When she pressed just below his navel, Victor nearly came off the bed. The pain was instant and absolute. "Okay," she stepped back. "That's not good." "What is it?" TJ moved closer. "Probably a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm. Could be a perforated organ. Could be internal bleeding from something else. Without imaging, I'm guessing. But any of those guesses means he needs surgery. Now." "Can you do it?" Elena turned to look at TJ, really look at him. Victor saw her taking in the details, the military bearing, the tattoos, the way he carried himself. She knew what TJ was, what Victor was. She knew exactly what she'd walked into. "I'm a combat medic. I've done field surgery. But this isn't the field. He needs a hospital, a surgical team, equipment I don't have." "He can't go to a hospital." "Then he's going to die." TJ pulled his gun, didn't point it at her, just let her see it. "That's not acceptable." Elena didn't flinch, didn't even look scared. She just looked tired. "You going to shoot me? Then who saves him?" "I'm asking you, as one veteran to another. He served, Army Ranger, Iraq. He came home and made bad choices, but he's still a veteran. Doesn't that count for something?" Elena's jaw tightened. Victor saw the conflict play out across her face. The oath she'd taken versus the reality of who she was being asked to save. Finally, she looked back at Victor. Her eyes met his. There was no sympathy there, no compassion, just calculation. If I do this, I walk away after. No strings, no threats, no debts. TJ nodded. You have my word. The word of a criminal. Elena's voice was flat. Forgive me if I don't find that reassuring. She turned back to Victor, knelt beside the bed so they were eye level. You want me to save you? Say please. Victor stared at her. For the first time in 20 years, someone was standing in front of him without fear, without respect, without even basic courtesy. She was demanding something from him: humility, acknowledgement, an admission that he needed her more than she needed him. His pride screamed at him to refuse, to tell her to go to hell, to die on this bed rather than bend to someone else's will. But the pain was too big. The fear was bigger. He was 48 years old and he was dying in his own bedroom because he'd spent 20 years making enemies instead of allies, because he'd chosen power over people, because he'd believed he was untouchable right up until the moment he wasn't. Please, his voice was barely a whisper, help me. Elena studied him for another long moment. Then she stood. TJ, I need you to help me move him. Clear that dining table. We're turning it into an operating room. For the next 4 hours, Victor Brennan existed in a haze of pain and morphine and the strange intimacy of having someone else's hands inside his body keeping him alive. Elena worked in near silence. Occasionally, she'd give TJ an instruction. Clamp this. Suture that. More light here. But mostly she just worked. Focused. Precise. Her hands steady even when his vitals crashed and TJ started to panic. Victor faded in and out. Sometimes he was in the penthouse. Sometimes he was in Fallujah, bleeding in the street while his squad called for medevac. Sometimes he was a kid again in the South Side, watching his father die slowly from cirrhosis while the world moved on without them. Time became meaningless. There was only the pain and Elena's voice cutting through it. Stay with me. Don't you dare die on this table. Pressure's dropping. I need more saline. He's bleeding faster than I can repair. This is bad. And once, when he surfaced from the darkness long enough to focus on her face, he tried to speak. Tried to tell her something. Anything. The morphine made words slippery. I didn't mean. His voice was thick, confused. The people at the shelter, I didn't mean for them to die. Elena's hands didn't stop moving, didn't even slow. You knew the risk, you just didn't care enough to avoid it. I was wrong. She paused then, just for a second, looked at him. Her eyes were exhausted, sad. Congratulations, you figured that out right before you die, not sure that counts as growth. She went back to work. Victor wanted to say more, wanted to explain, but the darkness was rising again, pulling him down. His last conscious thought was that he'd built an empire on being untouchable, on being stronger and smarter and meaner than everyone else. Turned out everyone bled the same. When Victor woke again, pale morning light was filtering through the windows. His mouth tasted like copper and regret. His abdomen felt like someone had tried to remove his organs and changed their mind halfway through. He was alive, somehow, against all odds and logic and probably medical science. Elena sat in a chair across the room, still in her bloody scrubs, eyes closed, but not sleeping, just resting. Her hands were wrapped in bandages. He could see blood seeping through. You're awake. She didn't open her eyes. Good, means the surgery probably worked. Probably. You coded twice. I brought you back twice. Your aorta was ruptured. I patched it with what I had. It'll hold for now. But you need proper imaging, follow-up surgery, and about 6 months of taking it easy. How long was I out? 14 hours. You lost a lot of blood. She finally opened her eyes, looked at him without emotion. I need to check your vitals, then I'm leaving. She stood with visible effort, walked to the bed, checked his pulse, his temperature, the bandages across his abdomen. She worked in silence, professional, detached. When she was done, she stepped back. "You'll live, against my better judgment." "Thank you." "Don't thank me, I didn't do it for you." She gathered her medical bag, started packing what was left of her supplies. "I did it because I took an oath, and because your friend asked me as one veteran to another, but you need to understand something." She turned to face him fully. "You're a criminal. You hurt people for profit. You make the world worse just by existing in it. The only reason you're breathing right now is because I don't get to choose who deserves to live. But don't mistake my oath for approval, or forgiveness, or anything other than the bare minimum requirement of my profession." Victor looked at her, really looked, saw the exhaustion, the scars, the weight she carried in her eyes. She'd saved his life, spent 14 hours keeping him alive, and she hated every second of it. "Why did you become a medic?" His voice was rough. "You could have been an operator. SEALs wanted you." "I wanted to save lives, not take them. Even enemy lives. Especially enemy lives. That's what separates us from them." Victor thought about that, about the man he'd been in Iraq, the ranger who'd believed in duty and honor and protecting the innocent, the man who'd slowly been corrupted by anger and greed and the realization that the world punished good people and rewarded bad ones. "I used to think like that." The words came out before he could stop them. "When I was deployed, before." "What changed?" "I got dishonorably discharged. Decided if the army thought I was a criminal, I'd become one." Elena's expression didn't change. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Or honesty. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her bag, walked toward the door. TJ appeared from the hallway, blocked her path without quite threatening her. "Boss," TJ looked at Victor. "She goes free." Victor met Elena's eyes one more time, saw the defiance there, the absolute refusal to be afraid of him. In 20 years, no one had looked at him like that, like he was just a man. Flawed, mortal, humbled. "She goes free." Victor's voice was stronger now. "No strings, no debts. She saved my life, that's enough." TJ stepped aside. Elena walked past him without a word. At the door, she paused, looked back. "You asked what changed for me." Her voice was quiet, almost kind, almost. "I watched children die in Kabul, spent hours trying to save them. Failed, came home, realized I couldn't save everyone, but I could save someone, anyone, everyone, didn't matter who, just that I tried." She shifted the bag on her shoulder. "You told me you used to think like I do, about separating yourself from the enemy, about being better. You can think like that again, if you want to, but wanting it isn't enough. You have to choose it, every day, every decision. And from what I've seen, you stopped choosing a long time ago." She left. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like finality. TJ approached the bed. "Boss, she knows too much. She knows where you live, what you look like. She could go straight to the FBI." "She won't." "How do you know?" Victor touched the bandages across his abdomen, felt the pull of the stitches, the physical evidence that he'd been dying and someone had cared enough to stop it even when they shouldn't have. "Because she took an oath, and unlike me, she still keeps it." He closed his eyes. Exhaustion pulled at him, but before sleep could claim him, one more thought surfaced, clear and sharp and terrifying in its simplicity. Victor Brennan had spent 20 years building an empire, creating an identity, becoming someone people feared, someone powerful, someone untouchable. He'd climbed to the top of a world built on violence and corruption and the suffering of others. And he'd done it all believing that strength meant never bending, never showing weakness, never admitting that you needed anyone. Then a woman half his size had saved his life while looking at him like he was exactly what he was. A criminal, a bully, a man who'd made the world worse just by existing in it. She'd saved him anyway, not because he deserved it, but because she'd promised to save everyone she could, even the ones who didn't deserve saving. For the first time in 20 years, Victor felt something he'd forgotten how to feel. Shame. And underneath the shame, buried so deep he almost didn't recognize it, was something even more dangerous. Something that could destroy everything he'd built if he let it grow. The possibility that Elena Cruz was right, that he could choose differently, that wanting to be better might actually be enough if he was willing to do the work. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, he was alive. That would have to be enough. Outside, Chicago woke to another morning. Commuters filled the highways. Coffee shops opened. People went to work and came home and lived lives that would never intersect with Victor's world. The city moved on, indifferent to the small drama that had played out in a penthouse 40 stories above the streets. In a clinic on the south side, Elena Cruz stripped off her bloody scrubs and stood under a scalding shower until the water ran cold. She thought about the man she'd saved. The criminal. The man who'd spent 20 years hurting people and had nearly died because of it. She thought about her oath. About the promise she'd made to save lives no matter whose life it was. She thought about whether saving someone like Victor Brennan made the world better or worse. She didn't have an answer, wasn't sure there was one. So she dried off, got dressed, and went downstairs to open the clinic. Because regardless of the questions she couldn't answer, there would be people who needed help today. And helping them was the only thing that made sense anymore. In the penthouse, Victor slept, dreamed, saw faces from his past. His father, drunk and dying. His army brothers, still young and alive in his memory, even though most of them were dead now or wished they were. The 7 people who died in the shelter fire 3 months ago because he'd ordered an operation without caring enough about who might get hurt. Kevin Martinez, his old army buddy from Fallujah, the man who'd saved Victor's life when an IED went off and Victor was buried under rubble. Kevin had pulled him out, carried him to the medevac, visited him in the hospital, called him a brother. And Victor had gotten him killed. Hadn't even known he was in that shelter. Hadn't cared enough to check. Had just given the order and let other people handle the details because details were beneath him. In the dream, Kevin stood in front of him. Not angry, just sad. "You used to be better than this, Vic." Victor wanted to answer, wanted to explain, but no words came, just shame. Just the weight of 20 years of choices that had led him here, dying in his own penthouse. Saved by a woman who despised him, knowing that he'd become exactly what he'd always hated. He woke with tears on his face, and a certainty that terrified him. Victor Brennan was untouchable, powerful, feared, but he was also empty, alone, and for the first time in 2 decades he knew it. The question was whether knowing was enough, or if he was already too far gone to change. The answer would come, but not today. Today he just had to survive, one breath at a time, one choice at a time, and hope that somewhere in the ruins of the man he used to be, there was still something worth saving. Even if he wasn't sure he deserved it, Victor Brennan woke to pain that felt like penance. The first 3 days after the surgery blurred together into a haze of morphine and regret. He existed in fragments. The ceiling of his bedroom, TJ's worried face appearing and disappearing, water forced between his lips, the pull of stitches across his abdomen every time he tried to move, and underneath it all, a strange new feeling that he couldn't quite name. Vulnerability, the knowledge that his body had betrayed him. That strength and power and 20 years of building, an empire meant nothing when your aorta decided to rupture at 2:47 in the morning. On the 4th day, consciousness returned with cruel clarity. Victor opened his eyes to find Elena Cruz sitting in the chair beside his bed. She wasn't looking at him. Her attention was fixed on a tablet, scrolling through what looked like medical charts. She'd changed out of the bloody scrubs. Now she wore jeans and a faded navy t-shirt. Her hair was still pulled back in that same severe bun. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept since the surgery. Probably hadn't. "You came back." His voice was gravel, unused. Elena didn't look up from the tablet. "Your vitals crashed yesterday. TJ called me, said you were running a fever. Infection risk after field surgery is high. Someone needed to check on you." "You could have said no." "I could have." She set the tablet down, finally met his eyes. "But my oath doesn't have a convenience clause. You're my patient until you're stable. After that, you're on your own." Victor tried to sit up. Pain lanced through his core. He fell back against the pillows, breathing hard. "Don't move." Elena stood, crossed to the bed. Her hands were cool and professional as she checked the bandages across his abdomen. "You have 47 internal sutures. Any one of them ruptures, you bleed out before I can fix it. So when I say don't move, I mean don't breathe heavy." "How long?" "Until you can move. 2 weeks minimum. Until you're combat ready. Never. You're 48. You just had emergency vascular surgery performed on a dining room table. Your days of physical confrontation are over." She pulled back the bandage. Victor looked down at his abdomen. The incision ran from his sternum to his navel. Neat stitches held him together. The skin around them was angry and red, infection trying to take hold. "This needs antibiotics." Elena's voice was clinical. "Strong ones, and you need to stay still, completely still. That means no business, no meetings, no stress." "I run an empire. Stress is the job description." "Then find someone else to run it, because if you don't rest, you'll be dead in a week." She rebandaged the wound with efficient movements. "I'm serious, Victor. Your body is trying to heal from catastrophic trauma. Every time you spike your blood pressure, you risk rupturing the repair. Every time you move wrong, you risk tearing the sutures. You want to live. You stay in this bed and you let other people handle things." Victor studied her face, looking for some sign of satisfaction, some evidence that she enjoyed seeing him helpless. Found nothing, just exhaustion and professional concern. "Why do you care?" The question came out before he could stop it. "You made it clear you think I'm garbage. Why not let nature take its course?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. She finished with the bandage, stripped off her gloves, walked to the window and looked out over the city. "You want the truth?" Her voice was soft, tired. "I don't care about you. I care about the oath I took. First, do no harm. That includes letting people die when I could save them, even people who probably deserve to die." She turned back to face him. "You asked me why I became a medic instead of an operator. I told you I wanted to save lives. That's true, but it's not the whole truth." She crossed her arms, defensive posture, like she was about to share something she didn't want to. "Kabul, August 2021. Evacuation. I was with a SEAL team providing medical support at the airport. Suicide bomber walked into a crowd of civilians trying to get through the gates. Mostly families, a lot of kids." Her voice stayed level, but her eyes went somewhere else, somewhere dark. "The explosion killed 13 Marines, wounded dozens more, but the civilian casualties were worse. I spent 6 hours in the dirt trying to save children whose bodies were more gone than there were. Used every skill I had, every trick, every prayer. Most of them died anyway." She looked down at her hands. Victor saw the scars, burns, cuts, the evidence of a life spent in service. "There was a little girl, maybe 8 years old. Shrapnel had torn through her chest. I knew she wouldn't make it. Knew it the second I saw the wound. But I tried anyway. Worked on her for 20 minutes. She died looking at me, like she thought I could fix it, like she trusted me." Elena's jaw tightened. "I came home 3 weeks later, got the medical discharge, PTSD. couldn't sleep, couldn't function, couldn't stop seeing her face. The therapist said I had survivor's guilt, that I needed to forgive myself for not being able to save everyone. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was that I'd failed when it mattered most, when innocent people needed me. She met Victor's eyes again. So I opened the clinic, started saving whoever came through the door. Gang members, addicts, homeless, didn't matter. Because if I could save them, maybe it balanced the scales. Maybe it meant I was still worth something, that the oath still meant something. That's why you saved me. Victor understood now. Not because you care about me, because you care about being the kind of person who saves everyone. Exactly. Elena's voice was sharp. Don't mistake my professionalism for compassion, and don't think this makes us friends. You're a patient, that's all. Before Victor could respond, TJ entered the room. He looked worse than Elena. Unshaven, eyes red. He'd been running the operation while Victor recovered. From the look of him, it wasn't going well. Boss, TJ nodded to Elena. Doc, we have a situation. What kind? Victor tried to sit up again, failed again. Alexei made his move. Hit 3 of our distribution points last night. Killed 2 guys, wounded 5 more, stole everything that wasn't nailed down. He's sending a message. Victor's mind immediately went tactical, calculating responses, retaliation options. Then he caught Elena watching him, saw the disappointment in her eyes, like she'd expected better and was being reminded why she shouldn't have. Pull everyone back. The words surprised him as much as they surprised TJ. Defensive positions. No retaliation. TJ stared. Boss, if we don't hit back, we look weak. The other families will think. I don't care what they think. Victor kept his voice level even though the pain was building. I care about our people staying alive. Alexei wants a war, fine, but we're not giving him one on his terms. We fortify. We protect what's ours. We don't chase. That's not how you've operated for 20 years. I've been operating wrong for 20 years. TJ looked at Elena, then back at Victor. You hit your head during surgery. Doc, is he thinking straight? Vitals are normal. Elena's voice was neutral. Cognitively, he's fine. This is just called learning from consequences. TJ shook his head. Alexei's gonna keep pushing. He smells blood in the water. We can't just. That's an order, TJ. Victor's voice sharpened. Pull back, defensive only, and get Frank to coordinate. I trust him to run things until I'm mobile. TJ stood there for another long moment. Then he nodded. Yes, sir. He left without another word. Elena watched him go. He doesn't understand. No, he's 26. He still thinks strength means hitting harder. I thought that too at his age. Victor closed his eyes. Exhaustion was pulling at him. Turns out strength is knowing when not to hit at all. Over the next week, Victor's penthouse became a prison of his own making. Elena returned twice a day, morning and evening. She'd check his vitals, change his bandages, adjust his medications. She never stayed longer than necessary, never made small talk, just did her job and left. Victor found himself waiting for those visits, not because of the medical care, but because she was the only person in his life who looked at him without fear or worship or calculation. She just looked at him like he was a man, flawed, mortal, accountable. On the 8th day, Victor finally managed to sit up without blacking out from pain. Small victory. He made it to the bathroom on his own, looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back was a stranger, pale, gaunt, the scar across his abdomen visible even through the bandages. This was what mortality looked like. This was the truth underneath the suits and the power and the reputation, just meat and blood and borrowed time. When he came out, Elena was waiting with medication. She watched him shuffle back to the bed, didn't offer help, just observed. You're healing faster than expected. She handed him pills and water. Good genetics. and you were in decent shape before this happened. Army training. Victor swallowed the pills. Even after all these years, I still do PT every morning, or I did. You'll be able to again. Eventually. Light exercise. Nothing that spikes your blood pressure. You're never going to be the man you were. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Elena tilted her head, studying him. You're different. How so? Less arrogant, more thoughtful. TJ says you've been making decisions that surprise him, pulling back instead of pushing forward, protecting your people instead of sacrificing them for territory. You've been talking to TJ about me. He's worried about you, thinks the surgery changed something in your brain. I assured him you're neurologically sound, but I'm starting to wonder if he's right. Something did change. Victor looked down at the bandages. I watched someone die. Kevin Martinez, my army buddy. He was in that shelter when my guys set it on fire. I didn't know he was there. Didn't care enough to check. Just gave the order and let other people handle the details. He met her eyes. You asked me what changed. That changed. Realizing that my arrogance got my brother killed. Realizing that if I died on your table, the last thing I would have known was that I'd become the kind of man who destroys instead of protects. That's not the man I want to be when I die. Elena sat down in the chair, not rushing to leave for once. What kind of man do you want to be? I don't know yet, but not this one. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, Chicago went about its business. Traffic sounds drifted up from 40 stories below. The city didn't care about Victor's epiphany. Didn't care that a crime boss was having a moral awakening. The world kept turning regardless. The FBI contacted me. Elena's voice broke the silence. Agent Diane Walsh. She wants to talk about my clinic, about some of the patients I've treated. Victor's stomach dropped. Did you? I didn't tell her about you, patient confidentiality, but she knows I was gone for a few days. She knows I treat people who don't want to talk to police. She's smart. She'll figure it out eventually. Will you tell her? Elena looked at him for a long time. I should. You're a criminal. You've hurt people. The world would probably be better if you were in prison. But you're also my patient. And I took an oath, which apparently includes protecting criminals who are trying to be better. She stood. Don't make me regret this, Victor. If you go back to being the man you were, I'll turn you in myself. That's a promise. She left before he could respond. 2 days later, the FBI made their move in a way Victor never saw coming. Elena was checking his wound when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Her expression shifted. Hardened. She set down the bandage she was holding and answered. This is Dr. Cruz. Her voice was professional, cold. Yes, Agent Walsh. I told you I'd call when I had time to talk. No, I'm with a patient right now. I can't. She paused, listening, her jaw tightened. That's not necessary. I said I'd come in voluntarily. No, I understand my legal obligations. Fine, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., your office. She hung up, stood there staring at the phone. Problem. Victor kept his voice neutral. The FBI wants to interview me. Officially. They have questions about patients I've treated in the last 6 months. They're implying I could face charges for not reporting certain injuries. Gunshot wounds. Stab wounds. Things that legally require notification. You've been protecting your patients. Yes, and now it's catching up to me. She looked at him. They're using me to get to people like you. They know I treat criminals. They want names, locations, information. Victor's mind raced through options. He could make the problem disappear. One phone call. Agent Walsh could have an accident, or be encouraged to drop her investigation, or be transferred to Alaska where she'd freeze and forget about Chicago crime. These were the solutions he would have implemented 2 weeks ago. Quick, brutal, effective. Instead, he heard himself say something different. Tell her the truth. Elena stared. Excuse me. Tell her you treat anyone who comes through your door, that you don't ask questions because the oath doesn't require it, that you're not a police informant, you're a doctor. Stand on your principles. She can't charge you for doing your job. She can try. Let her. You've got 14 years of military service, combat decorations, a clean record. You're helping an underserved community. Any prosecutor who goes after you looks like they're punishing someone for being compassionate. The media would destroy them. Elena sat down slowly. You're giving me legal strategy. You. I've spent 20 years avoiding prosecution. I know how they think. They're hoping you'll be scared enough to cooperate. Don't be. Call their bluff. And if they arrest me? They won't. But if they do, I'll make sure you have the best lawyer in Chicago. I owe you that much. Elena studied him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Who are you, and what did you do with Victor Brennan? Before he could answer, the window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the bedroom floor. Victor's instincts screamed at him to move, to take cover, to fight. But his body wouldn't cooperate. The sutures pulled. Pain white and hot, he couldn't get off the bed fast enough. Elena moved faster. She grabbed him, pulled him off the mattress, and they both hit the floor behind the bed frame. More glass shattered. Something punched through the headboard where Victor's head had been seconds earlier. Gunfire, suppressed but unmistakable. Stay down, Elena's voice was sharp. Command voice. The SEAL talking, not the doctor. She had her phone out, dialing 911 with shaking hands while keeping her body between Victor and the window. TJ burst through the bedroom door, gun drawn. He took in the situation in a glance, moved to the wall beside the shattered window, looked out carefully. Sniper, building across the street, professional setup. He pulled back. Alexei's work. More shots. The mirror above the dresser exploded. Victor's ears rang from the impacts. Elena had her hands on his abdomen, checking the bandages. Her face was pale, but her hands stayed steady. You're bleeding. Sutures pulled when we hit the floor. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're hemorrhaging. I need to. Later, Victor grabbed her wrist. Not hard, just firm. Right now, we need to get out of this room. TJ was already moving. He grabbed a tactical vest from the closet, tossed it to Elena. Put this on, now. I'm a doctor, not. You're a target, put it on. Elena pulled on the vest. It was too big, hung awkwardly on her small frame. But it would stop bullets. That was all that mattered. TJ helped Victor stand. Every movement was agony. The sutures were definitely torn. Victor could feel blood running down his abdomen, but dying slowly from internal bleeding was better than dying quickly from a sniper round. They made it to the hallway. TJ led them to the interior bathroom. No windows, solid walls. He positioned Elena and Victor in the bathtub, then took up position by the door. How many shooters? Victor's voice was tight with pain. Just one that I saw, but Alexei doesn't work with just one. There's a team. They're probably sweeping the building now. Police. 6 minutes out, maybe less. We don't have 6 minutes. TJ checked his magazine. I know. Elena had pulled the vest off Victor, was examining his abdomen. Blood soaked through the bandages. Her face was grim. The repair is failing. You're bleeding internally. I need to operate. Now. Kind of a bad time, Doc. If I don't stop this bleeding, you'll be dead before the police arrive. Victor laughed, couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation. Trapped in his own bathroom, bleeding out, while a former SEAL medic who despised him tried to save his life for the second time in 2 weeks. This was what his empire had become. This was the legacy of 20 years of making enemies. Do it. He looked at TJ. How long can you hold them? Long enough. TJ ejected his magazine, checked the rounds, slammed it back in. But boss, after this, we can't stay in Chicago. Alexei's going to keep coming. He wants you dead. Then we give him what he wants. Both TJ and Elena looked at him. Not literally. Victor grimaced as Elena started cutting away the bandages. But we let him think he won. We disappear, go dark. Let him think I died. Hell, we can even leak it. Victor Brennan killed in his own penthouse. Crime boss dead. Empire crumbled. And then what? TJ asked. Then we rebuild. Different. Better. Without the violence, without the reputation. Just legitimate businesses and people who need work. TJ stared. You're serious? I'm dying again. For the second time this month. Yeah, I'm serious. Elena had the bandages off now. She could see the damage, internal bleeding. The surgical repair had torn. She looked up at Victor. I need to compress this. It's going to hurt. Everything hurts. She pressed down on the wound. Victor's vision went white. He bit down on a scream. Elena kept pressure steady, relentless. Her face was inches from his. He could see the concentration in her eyes, the absolute focus. This woman had saved his life once already. Now she was doing it again, while under fire, while her own life was in danger, because of an oath she'd taken years ago to people she'd never met. Why? The word came out strangled. Why do you keep saving me? Elena didn't look up from the wound. Because you're my patient, and I don't abandon patients. Even ones who don't deserve saving. Especially those ones. They need it most. Gunfire erupted in the hallway. TJ returned fire. The bathroom filled with the smell of cordite. Elena didn't flinch, didn't stop working, just kept pressure on Victor's abdomen while the world went to hell around them. TJ fired twice more, then silence. He ducked back into the bathroom. 2 down, but there's more coming. We need to move. He can't move. Elena's voice was flat. If I release this pressure, he bleeds out in minutes. If we stay here, we all die. Victor looked between them. 2 warriors, 2 people who'd served, who'd sacrificed, who were better than him in every way that mattered. And they were trapped because of choices he'd made years ago. Because he'd stolen from a Russian arms dealer and thought there wouldn't be consequences. Leave me. His voice was steady. Both of you, get out. TJ, take Elena to the service elevator. Get her to the clinic, then disappear. There are accounts set up. Money in your name, take it and run. I'm not leaving you, boss. That's an order. Respectfully, sir, screw your orders. TJ reloaded. You don't leave men behind, you taught me that. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Elena kept pressure on the wound. Her arms were shaking from the effort, but she didn't let up. We're all walking out of here. Her voice was quiet but absolute. All 3 of us. I didn't spend 14 hours keeping you alive just to watch you die in a bathtub. The sirens grew louder. Tires screeched outside. Doors slammed. Commands shouted. The cavalry had arrived. TJ moved to the bathroom door. Listened. They're pulling back. Alexei's guys, they don't want to tangle with cops. Smart. Victor's voice was getting weaker, blood loss catching up with him. We're not. No, TJ smiled, tight and humorless. We're loyal, different thing. The next hour blurred into chaos. Police flooded the building, found 2 dead men in the hallway, Russian nationals, armed with military-grade weapons. The sniper across the street was gone, vanished before the police could secure the building. Professional extraction. Paramedics arrived, tried to take Victor. Elena refused to let them. rode with him in the ambulance, maintaining pressure on the wound the entire way. She stayed with him in the ER, scrubbed in for the surgery, assisted the trauma team. Didn't leave until he was stable and in recovery. When Victor woke 12 hours later, she was gone. TJ sat in the chair instead. He looked exhausted, older than his 26 years, like the last few weeks had aged him a decade. "Where is she?" Victor's throat was dry, raw. "The clinic. FBI picked her up this morning. Agent Walsh. They're questioning her about the shooting, about you, about everything." Victor tried to sit up. Couldn't. His body was done, completely tapped. "Is she okay?" "Physically, yeah. Legally," TJ shrugged. "They're trying to flip her, offering deals. Immunity if she testifies against you, witness protection, the whole package." "Will she take it?" "I don't know, boss. She should. You're a criminal, she's a civilian. This isn't her fight." Victor closed his eyes. "It became her fight when I dragged her into it." "You didn't drag her, I did. I'm the one who pulled a gun, made her come to the penthouse." TJ's voice was rough, guilty. "This is on me." "No, it's on me. You were following my orders, my culture. 20 years of teaching people that results matter more than methods, that we do whatever it takes, that civilians are acceptable collateral." Victor opened his eyes. "I was wrong about all of it." TJ leaned forward. "Boss, what are we doing? Really? Because the last 2 weeks you've been making decisions that don't make sense. Pulling back from Alexei, talking about going legitimate. Now you're worried about some doctor who hates you. This isn't you." "Maybe it should be." "But it's not. You built an empire on being ruthless. You can't just wake up one day and decide to be someone else." "Why not?" Victor met his eyes. "You did. You were a Marine, honorable, principled. Then you came to work for me and I turned you into something else. So if you can change in one direction, why can't I change in the other?" TJ sat back, processing. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm done with all of it. The violence, the corruption, the pretending that we're anything other than parasites feeding off this city's pain." Victor's voice strengthened. "You want to know what we're doing? We're getting out, for real this time. We liquidate the criminal operations. We keep the legitimate businesses. We cooperate with the FBI. We serve whatever time they give us. And when we get out, we build something that doesn't require hurting people. They'll kill you. Alexei, the other families, everyone who sees this as weakness. Let them try. I'm already dying. Might as well die doing something that matters." TJ stood, paced to the window, looked out over the city. "The guys won't understand. Most of them have been in this life too long to change." "Then we let them go, with severance, references, help them find legitimate work if they want it. But we don't force anyone to stay in a burning building just because we set the fire." TJ turned back. "And me?" "You're 26 years old. You have a degree, skills. You were a good Marine before I ruined you. You can be a good civilian after." Victor paused. "I'm giving you a choice. TJ, stay and help me try to fix this. Or walk away with enough money to start over somewhere else. No judgment either way." TJ was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "What did she say to you? The doc? What did she say that changed you?" Victor thought back to that first conversation. Elena looking at him with those exhausted, unforgiving eyes, telling him he could choose to be better, that wanting it wasn't enough, that he had to decide, every day, every decision. She said I used to think like her, about being better than the enemy, about separating myself through honor instead of just firepower, and she asked me why I stopped. What did you tell her? That I got dishonorably discharged and decided to become what they thought I was. Victor looked down at the bandages, at the evidence of how close he'd come to dying. Twice. But that was a lie. The truth is I chose this, every step, every decision. I chose power over principle, fear over respect, and I kept choosing it for 20 years because it was easier than admitting I was wrong. He met TJ's eyes. I don't want to die being wrong, so I'm choosing different. Starting now, you with me. TJ stood there processing. Then he nodded. Yeah, boss, I'm with you. 3 days later, Agent Diane Walsh sat across from Victor in a hospital conference room. She was mid-40s, sharp eyes, professional demeanor. The kind of FBI agent who'd spent decades building cases and didn't appreciate criminals wasting her time. Elena sat next to Victor. She'd refused to leave. Said if he was going to confess to federal crimes, she wanted to make sure he was medically stable enough to understand what he was doing. Really, Victor suspected she just wanted to make sure he followed through. Mr. Brennan, Agent Walsh opened a folder. You requested this meeting. I'm here as a courtesy because Dr. Cruz vouched for you, but I want to be clear. Anything you say can and will be used against you. I understand. Victor's voice was steady. I want to make a deal. I'm listening. I'll testify against Alexei Sokolov, provide evidence of his arms trafficking network. Names, dates, transaction records, everything you need to build a RICO case that'll put him away for life. Walsh's expression didn't change. In exchange for immunity for Dr. Cruz, complete, non-negotiable. She had no knowledge of my operations. She was forced into treating me. She's a civilian who got caught in crossfire. That's not how this works. I don't grant immunity. The prosecutor does. Then get me the prosecutor, because that's the deal. Elena walks free. In exchange, I give you Alexei and everyone else in his network. Walsh looked at Elena. Doctor, do you want to weigh in here? Elena's jaw was tight. I want to go back to running my clinic and helping people who need it. Whatever gets me there fastest. Walsh made a note. What else? I'll also provide evidence against my own operations. Financial records, witnesses, everything. I'll plead guilty to whatever charges you want to file. Racketeering, conspiracy. The shelter fire that killed 7 people. Victor's voice cracked slightly. Kevin Martinez, my army buddy, I'm responsible for his death. I want that on the record. Walsh sat back. You're confessing to manslaughter. Among other things, yes. Why? Victor looked at Elena. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not approval, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. Like she was witnessing something and wanted to remember it accurately. Because I'm tired. Victor turned back to Walsh. Tired of running, tired of hurting people, tired of being someone I hate. I'm 48 years old. I've spent 20 years building an empire on other people's suffering. That ends now. Walsh studied him. You understand what you're offering. Full cooperation means prison time. Significant prison time. We're talking 15 to 20 years minimum. I understand. And you're willing to accept that, to give up your freedom, your empire, everything. Victor thought about the man he'd been 2 weeks ago. Arrogant, powerful, untouchable. That man would have laughed at this conversation, would have found a way to manipulate the situation, to come out on top, to win. But Victor wasn't that man anymore. That man had died on Elena's operating table. What came back was smaller, weaker, but somehow more real. Yes, his voice was firm. I'm willing. Walsh closed her folder. I'll talk to the prosecutor, set up a formal proffer session. No promises, but if you're serious about cooperating, we'll consider it. She stood, extended her hand. Victor shook it. Her grip was firm, professional. One more thing. Walsh looked at Elena. The gunshot patient you treated 2 weeks ago, the gang member, he died yesterday, infection. His friends think you let him die on purpose. They're looking for you. Elena's face went pale. I did everything I could. I know, but they don't care. I can offer you protection, safe house, until things cool down. I have a clinic to run. You have a life to protect. Walsh's voice softened slightly. These aren't rational people, doctor. They want revenge. Let us help you. Elena looked at Victor. He saw the question in her eyes, saw her weighing options, calculating risks. She'd spent 2 weeks saving his life, multiple times, and now his world was swallowing hers, dragging her into danger she never asked for. Take it. Victor kept his voice gentle. Let them protect you. The clinic will be there when it's safe. And you. I'll be in federal prison, probably for the rest of my natural life, but I'll be alive because of you. He managed a small smile. Seems like a fair trade. Elena stood, gathered her things, looked at him one last time. Don't make this meaningless, Victor. You're choosing accountability. Make sure you follow through. I will. Good, she turned to Walsh. Where's this safe house? As they left, TJ entered. He'd been waiting outside. His face was grim. It's done, boss. I liquidated the criminal operations, paid everyone's severance, transferred the legitimate businesses to a trust. We're out. Clean. As we're going to get. TJ sat down. Alexei's not going to like this. He wanted a war. We're giving him nothing. He can have his war with the FBI. I'm done fighting. They sat in silence for a while. Outside the window, Chicago stretched endlessly. The city that Victor had tried to own. The city that had nearly killed him. The city that would keep turning long after he was forgotten. What happens now? TJ's voice was quiet. Now we wait. The prosecutor decides if my cooperation is worth a deal. If it is, I plead guilty. Serve my time, try to become someone worth being. Victor looked at his hands. Hands that had built an empire. Hands that had hurt people. Hands that were empty now of everything except the possibility of change. If it's not, I go to trial, get convicted. Serve my time anyway. Either way, the result's the same. Prison. Accountability. TJ nodded slowly. And after I teach GED programs, anger management, help other guys not make my mistakes. Victor met his eyes. You could do the same. You're young enough to get your life back. Social work degree. Veterans programs make a difference. Instead of making money. Money doesn't mean much when you're dead, or when you've become someone you can't look at in the mirror. Victor gestured to the bandages under his hospital gown. I learned that the hard way. You don't have to. TJ was quiet for a long time. Then he stood. I'll think about it, boss. That's all I'm asking. After TJ left, Victor was alone with his thoughts. The hospital room was quiet except for the beep of monitors and the distant sound of nurses in the hallway. He thought about Kevin Martinez, about the 7 people who died in that shelter fire, about the countless others he'd hurt or exploited or destroyed over 20 years of building power. He couldn't fix what he'd broken, couldn't bring back the dead, couldn't undo the choices that had led him here, but he could stop making it worse, could face consequences instead of running from them, could try, in whatever time he had left, to become someone who added value to the world instead of just taking from it. It wasn't redemption. Not yet, maybe never, but it was a start. And for the first time in 20 years, Victor Brennan felt something he'd forgotten how to feel. Something small and fragile and dangerous in how easily it could be crushed. Hope. The question was whether it would survive what came next. Whether his determination to change would hold up against federal prosecutors and prison, and the long, grinding reality of paying for his crimes. Whether wanting to be better was enough when the world remembered who you'd been. Victor didn't know, couldn't know. All he could do was choose, every day, every decision. Like Elena had said, choose to be better, choose accountability. choose the hard right over the easy wrong, and hope that somewhere, in the wreckage of the man he used to be, there was still something worth saving. Even if he was the only one who thought so. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago was built to intimidate. Marble columns rose 3 stories high. The seal of the United States hung behind the judge's bench, like a reminder that this was where nations settled accounts with those who broke their laws. Victor Brennan sat at the defense table in a suit that cost more than most people made in a month, hands folded, waiting for his life to end. 8 months had passed since he'd agreed to cooperate. 8 months of depositions and grand jury testimony and meetings with prosecutors who looked at him like he was something they'd scraped off their shoes. He'd given them everything. Transaction records dating back 15 years, names of corrupt officials, evidence of money laundering, extortion, racketeering. And most importantly, he'd given them Alexei Sokolov. The Russian's trial had concluded 3 weeks ago. 40 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Arms trafficking, murder, conspiracy. The jury had deliberated for 6 hours, came back with guilty on all counts. Alexei had stared at Victor across the courtroom as the verdict was read. No anger in his eyes, just a cold promise. This wasn't over. Now it was Victor's turn. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the back rows. Victims' families sat in the gallery. Kevin Martinez's widow was there, Maria Martinez. Victor had seen her come in, watched her take a seat directly behind the prosecution table where she could stare at the back of his head. She had every right. Her husband was dead because Victor hadn't cared enough to check who might be in that building before he gave the order to burn it down. Agent Diane Walsh sat at the prosecution table. Next to her was the assistant U.S. attorney, a woman named Sarah Chen who'd spent 6 months building the case against Victor. She was good, thorough, the kind of prosecutor who didn't accept plea deals unless she was getting everything she wanted. And she'd gotten it. Full cooperation, complete admission of guilt, a defendant who wasn't fighting. Victor's lawyer, a public defender named Marcus Webb, who'd been assigned when Victor liquidated all his assets to pay restitution, sat quietly making notes. There wasn't much to defend. Victor had pled guilty to everything. Manslaughter in the deaths of 7 civilians, racketeering, conspiracy, money laundering. The only question now was sentencing. The bailiff stood. All rise, the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. Everyone stood. Judge Morrison entered from her chambers. She was in her early 60s. Silver hair cut short, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She'd been on the federal bench for 20 years, had a reputation for being fair but unforgiving. She sat. Everyone else followed. Mr. Brennan, her voice carried across the courtroom without effort. You've pled guilty to serious crimes. Before I pass sentence, I'm going to hear from the victims, then from you. Then I'll decide what justice requires. Understood? Yes, Your Honor. Victor's voice was steady. Judge Morrison nodded to the prosecution. Ms. Chen, your witnesses. What followed was 3 hours of testimony that stripped Victor down to nothing. Maria Martinez went first. She walked to the witness stand with photographs. Pictures of Kevin, their wedding day, him in his army uniform, their 2 kids. She set them on the rail where Victor could see them. My husband served his country for 8 years. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. He came home with PTSD, nightmares, couldn't hold a job, we lost our house, ended up in that shelter because we had nowhere else to go. Kevin was trying, going to therapy, looking for work, getting better. She looked directly at Victor. You knew him, in Iraq. He told me you saved his life when an IED went off, that you carried him to the medevac, that you were brothers. Victor couldn't look away, couldn't hide from this. And you killed him, Maria's voice broke. You didn't even know he was there, didn't care enough to check, just gave an order and let other people handle the details. My husband, your brother, burned to death in a shelter fire because you were too arrogant to think about consequences. She picked up the photos, walked back to her seat. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of her crying. 5 more families testified, each one with their own photos, their own stories. A grandmother who'd been volunteering at the shelter, a teenager who'd been sleeping there while his mother worked night shifts, an Iraq veteran who'd been trying to get clean and had been sober for 90 days when he died. Victor listened to every word, forced himself to hear it. This was accountability. This was what facing consequences looked like, not abstract legal terms, real people, real loss, real pain that he'd caused. When the victims finished, Judge Morrison looked at Victor. "Mr. Brennan, you have the right to make a statement. Do you wish to speak?" Victor stood. His lawyer had advised against this. Said anything he said could only make things worse. But Victor didn't care about making things better. He cared about telling the truth. "Your Honor, I don't have an excuse for what I did. I can't claim I didn't know better. I knew exactly what I was doing. I spent 20 years building a criminal enterprise. I hurt people, destroyed lives, corrupted good men. And I did it all while telling myself I was somehow different, somehow justified, because I'd served my country, because I'd grown up poor, because the world had been unfair to me first." He looked at Maria Martinez. "Kevin Martinez saved my life in Fallujah. When the IED went off, I was buried under rubble, couldn't breathe, thought I was going to die. Kevin dug me out with his bare hands, carried me 200 yards under fire, stayed with me until the medevac arrived. He was a hero, a real one, not like me." Victor's throat tightened, but he pushed through. "I repaid his heroism by getting him killed. I gave an order without checking, without caring, because I'd spent so long being powerful that I forgot people were real, that they mattered, that my choices had consequences beyond my profit margin." He turned back to the judge. "I'm not asking for mercy. I'm asking that the court recognize one thing. The young men who worked for me, especially TJ Reeves, they deserve a chance I didn't give them. They were corrupted by my example, my culture. Let them go. Give them immunity. Let them rebuild their lives. As for me, I'll serve whatever sentence you think is just. I earned it." Victor sat down. The courtroom was quiet. Judge Morrison made notes. Then she looked up. "Mr. Brennan, I've been on this bench for 20 years. I've sentenced hundreds of defendants. Most of them claim innocence even when the evidence is overwhelming. Most of them blame everyone except themselves. You're different. You've accepted full responsibility. You've cooperated completely. And you've shown what appears to be genuine remorse." She paused. "But remorse doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't undo the damage you've caused. 7 people are dead because of your arrogance. Dozens more were hurt, families destroyed, a community terrorized. The law requires consequences proportional to the harm." Judge Morrison shuffled papers. "On the charge of voluntary manslaughter in the deaths of 7 civilians, I sentence you to 10 years in federal prison. On the charges of racketeering and conspiracy, I sentence you to 8 years, to run consecutively. Total sentence, 18 years in federal custody. You'll be eligible for parole in 12 years with good behavior." She looked at him over her reading glasses. "Mr. Brennan, you'll have time in prison to reflect on the man you were and potentially become the man you claim you want to be. I hope you use it wisely. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down. Just like that, Victor Brennan's freedom ended. 2 U.S. Marshals approached. Victor stood. Let them cuff his hands behind his back. His lawyer was saying something about appeals. Victor shook his head. No appeals. He'd earned this. Time to pay. As they led him toward the side door, Victor looked back at the gallery one last time. Maria Martinez was still crying. Other families were hugging each other. Relief, closure, justice. He'd given them that much at least. And in the very back row, partially hidden behind a column, stood Elena Cruz. She'd come despite everything, despite the danger, despite the fact that seeing him sentenced should have brought her satisfaction. She stood there in jeans and that same faded navy t-shirt. Her eyes met his across the courtroom. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just nodded once. Acknowledgement, respect for following through. Then she was gone, slipping out the back door before anyone could see her. Victor was led through the side entrance toward the transport van that would take him to FCI Terre Haute, medium security federal prison in Indiana. This would be home for the next 12 years minimum, if he made parole, if he survived that long. The van had no windows in the back. Victor sat in darkness as Chicago disappeared behind him. He was 49 now, sentenced to 18 years. He'd be 61 at the earliest if he made parole. Old, used up, forgotten. The empire he'd built would be a footnote in Chicago crime history. The man he'd been would be remembered only by the people he'd hurt. That was okay. That was justice. FCI Terre Haute was exactly what Victor expected. Concrete and razor wire and men who'd made the same mistakes he had. Some were still pretending they were innocent, still angry at the system, still planning their next move. Victor wasn't any of those things. He was just tired. The first year was the hardest. Learning the rhythms of prison life, the violence that erupted over nothing, the crushing boredom, the noise that never stopped, men yelling, doors slamming, the constant reminder that your life was no longer yours, that every moment was controlled by someone else. Victor kept his head down, followed the rules, avoided the gangs who tried to recruit him based on his reputation. He'd been someone on the outside. In here, he was just another number, just another inmate counting days. In the second year, something changed. A young man named Marcus Ortiz arrived, 23 years old, gang member from Chicago, sentenced to 5 years for drug trafficking. Angry, scared, trying to act hard to survive. Victor recognized the type, recognized himself at that age, before the army, before he learned discipline, just a kid making bad choices and not understanding consequences until it was too late. Marcus got into a fight his first week, ended up in the infirmary with a broken jaw. When he came back, he sat in the common area during rec time, staring at nothing. Victor walked over, sat down next to him. "You keep fighting, you'll keep losing." Victor kept his voice neutral. "You're what, 150 soaking wet? Half these guys are twice your size." "I can handle myself." Marcus's words were slurred from the jaw injury. "No, you can't. And that's okay. You're not supposed to handle everything alone. That's what got you in here." Marcus looked at him. "You giving me advice? You're in here too." "Yeah, and I earned it. 18-year sentence. Manslaughter, racketeering. I hurt a lot of people before they finally stopped me. You want to end up like me? 50 years old, life in ruins, no one waiting on the outside." "Got no one anyway." "Then you've got nothing to lose by trying something different. There's a GED program here. Education classes. You got a high school diploma." Marcus shook his head. "Then start there. Get your GED. Take some college classes. Learn a trade. Use this time to become someone worth being, or waste it fighting and counting days. Your choice." Marcus was quiet for a long time. "Why do you care?" "Because someone should have told me this when I was your age. And because if I can stop one kid from making my mistakes, maybe that counts for something." Marcus enrolled in the GED program the next week. Victor helped him study, spent rec time going over math problems and reading comprehension. Turned out Marcus was smart, just never had anyone who gave a damn whether he learned anything. 6 months later, Marcus passed his GED exam. Cried when he got the results. First thing he'd accomplished in his life that didn't involve breaking the law. Victor was there when he got the certificate. Felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not in himself, in someone else. in the possibility that maybe broken people could still fix other broken people. Word spread. Other inmates started asking Victor for help. Study sessions in the library became regular. Victor taught math, reading, basic computer skills, found out he was good at it. Good at breaking down concepts. Good at being patient. Good at seeing potential in people that others had written off. The warden noticed, called Victor into his office. "Brennan, you've been here 3 years, model inmate, no incidents, and you've gotten 17 men their GADs. Why?" Victor thought about how to answer. "Because I spent 20 years teaching people the wrong things, how to hurt, how to exploit, how to take. Figure I owe the universe some teaching of the right things." The warden studied him. "We have an opening for a teacher's aide in the education program. Pays 30 cents an hour. You interested?" "Yes, sir." Victor became an official part of the prison education staff. Taught GED prep classes 5 days a week. Helped inmates work toward college degrees through correspondence programs. Watched men transform from angry and lost to focused and hopeful. Not all of them. Some were too far gone, too committed to the life, but enough to matter. Years passed. Victor's hair turned fully gray. The scar on his abdomen ached when the weather changed. He lost weight, got lean in the way prisoners do, weathered, worn, but somehow more real than he'd been in the penthouse, more present. Like stripping away the power and the money and the reputation revealed something underneath that had been buried for 20 years. In his 5th year, Victor got news. TJ had graduated, bachelor's degree in social work. He'd sent a letter to the prison. Victor read it 3 times. "Boss, I know you said not to call you that anymore, but old habits. I graduated, top of my class. Got a job with a veterans reentry program in Chicago, helping guys coming home from deployment, helping them avoid the mistakes we made. I think about you every day, about how you could have saved yourself and chose to save me instead. I won't waste that, I promise. When you get out, there's a job waiting. We're going to help people together, like we should have been doing all along. TJ." Victor kept the letter in his cell, read it when the days got hard, when the walls felt like they were closing in, when he wondered if any of this mattered. The letter reminded him. It mattered. He'd saved one person, really saved him, not just from prison, from becoming what Victor had been. That was something. In his 8th year, Victor got a visitor he didn't expect. Elena Cruz walked into the visitation room. She was 44 now, more gray in her hair, more lines around her eyes, but the same steady competence, the same unforgiving honesty. They sat across from each other, a table between them, a guard watching from the corner. The rules said no physical contact. That was fine. Victor didn't know what he'd say anyway. "You came." His voice was rougher than it used to be, prison voice. "I came." Elena set her hands on the table, folded neatly, professional. "I wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm in prison. How do you think I'm doing?" "Better than I expected, actually. I read the warden's reports. You've helped 43 men get their GEDs. 12 have gone on to college degrees. 0 disciplinary incidents. Model prisoner." She tilted her head. "You weren't lying. You really are trying to be different." "Trying is all I can do from in here." "It's more than most manage." Elena paused. "Maria Martinez came to see me, Kevin's widow. She wanted to know if I thought you were genuine, if your remorse was real." Victor's chest tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I couldn't read minds, but I could read actions. And your actions for the last 8 years suggest you meant what you said in that courtroom." Elena's eyes softened slightly. "She's doing better. The restitution money helped. Her kids are in college. She started a foundation in Kevin's name. Helps homeless veterans find housing and treatment. She's turning her grief into something that saves lives." "Good, that's good." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Elena spoke again. "Why did you ask to see me? after all this time? Victor had been dreading this question. Because I wanted to tell you something, before I asked for parole, before I had any expectation of getting out. I wanted you to know that you were right. About what? About everything, that I could choose to be better, that wanting it wasn't enough, that I had to decide every day, every decision. You said that to me 8 years ago and I didn't understand it then, but I do now. He looked at his hands, calloused from prison work. I'm not the same man who kidnapped you, who threatened you, who built an empire on suffering. That man is gone, dead. I killed him, not with a gun, just with time and choices and the slow work of becoming someone else. Elena was quiet, processing. What do you want from me, Victor? Nothing. I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know that you saved my life in more ways than one, and I'm grateful. She stood, preparing to leave. Then she paused. I'll be back in 4 years when you're eligible for parole. I'll testify at your hearing. Tell them what I've seen, whether you deserve a second chance. She met his eyes. Don't make me regret it. I won't. Elena left. Victor watched her go, felt something strange and fragile bloom in his chest. Not hope exactly. He'd learned not to hope for things he couldn't control, but something close. Possibility. The chance that maybe the work he was doing mattered to someone besides himself. 4 years later, almost to the day, Victor Brennan stood before a parole board in a conference room at FCI Terre Haute. He was 61 years old now. Gray-haired. Lean. Weathered. The board consisted of 3 people, a federal prosecutor, a victims' rights advocate, and a corrections expert. They had his file in front of them. 12 years of behavior reports, education records, testimony from inmates he'd helped. The prosecutor spoke first. Mr. Brennan, you've served 12 years of an 18-year sentence. You're eligible for early release based on good behavior and your work in the education program. But parole isn't automatic. You need to convince us that you're not a danger to society, that you've changed. Why should we believe you? Victor had prepared for this, thought about what to say for months. In the end, he went with the truth. I can't prove I've changed. I can only show you what I've done. I've taught 78 men to read and write. I've helped them pass their GEDs, get college degrees, learn trades. I've spent 12 years trying to build up instead of tear down, trying to add value instead of just taking. If that's not enough, I'll serve the rest of my sentence. But I'd like the chance to do more good on the outside than I can do in here. The victims' rights advocate shuffled papers. We've received testimony from several people regarding your parole request. Dr. Elena Cruz, the physician who treated you, testified that you've demonstrated consistent behavioral change over 12 years. Tyler Reeves, who runs a veterans reentry program, has offered you employment upon release and speaks highly of your transformation. The advocate paused, looked at Victor. However, we also received a letter from Maria Martinez, widow of Kevin Martinez, one of your victims. Victor's stomach dropped. He'd known this might happen. Maria had every right to oppose his release. Mrs. Martinez initially opposed your parole. The advocate's voice was measured. Her letter detailed the pain your actions caused, the loss her family suffered. She stated that 12 years felt inadequate for taking her husband's life. Victor nodded. I understand. She's right to feel that way. However, the advocate continued, Mrs. Martinez also stated that after visiting you in prison 6 months ago, after speaking with the men you've taught and seeing the work you've done, she's reconsidered her position. Victor's head snapped up. She visited me. You didn't know, the advocate looked surprised. She came under an assumed name, sat in the back of one of your GED classes, watched you teach, spoke to your students afterward. The advocate read from the letter. Mrs. Martinez writes, I came to that prison wanting to see the man who killed my husband still being the monster I remembered. Instead, I saw a teacher. I saw patience. I saw a man helping others avoid the mistakes he made. I saw my husband Kevin in him. Kevin always said Victor was a good man who lost his way. I didn't believe it, but after watching him teach those young men the way Kevin would have taught them, I started to wonder if my husband was right. If Victor Brennan can use his remaining years to save even one person from the path he took, then Kevin's death might mean something. I don't forgive him. I never will. But I won't stand in the way of him trying to be better. Kevin would want him to have that chance. Victor's eyes burned. He blinked hard, didn't trust himself to speak. The corrections expert reviewed the file. Your prison record is exemplary. 0 incidents. Extensive participation in rehabilitation programs. Significant positive impact on other inmates. From a corrections standpoint, you're exactly the kind of inmate we hope to release. Someone who used their time productively. The 3 board members conferred quietly. Victor sat still, waiting, not hoping, just present. Whatever they decided, he'd accept it. He'd earned his sentence. If they wanted him to serve the full 18 years, that was their right. Finally, the prosecutor spoke. Mr. Brennan, this board grants your request for parole. You'll be released in 30 days. Conditions include 5 years supervised release, weekly check-ins with a parole officer, continued participation in counseling and community service. Any violation will result in immediate return to custody. Do you accept these terms? Yes, Victor's voice was steady. Thank you. Don't thank us. Thank the people who testified on your behalf, particularly Mrs. Martinez. Her support carried significant weight, and don't make us regret this decision. 30 days later, Victor walked out of FCI Terre Haute wearing donated clothes and carrying a plastic bag with his belongings. The sun was too bright, the air too open. He stood on the sidewalk outside the prison gates, feeling like he'd been born into a world he didn't recognize. A car pulled up. TJ got out. He was 39 now, filled out, confident, married according to his letters, had a daughter. He smiled when he saw Victor. Boss, TJ grabbed him in a hug, hard, real. Welcome back. Not boss anymore, just Victor. Fair enough, come on. I'll drive you to Chicago, got a lot to catch up on. They drove north through Indiana into Illinois. TJ talked about his work, the reentry program he'd built. 300 veterans served in the last 5 years. Housing, jobs, counseling, real help instead of just empty promises. He'd gotten married 4 years ago, had a daughter named Maria after Kevin Martinez's widow. Wanted to honor the man who died so that both TJ and Victor could learn what really mattered. Victor listened, felt pride. This was his legacy, not an empire, not power, but one good man who'd chosen differently because Victor had finally chosen to help instead of hurt. They reached Chicago as the sun was setting. TJ drove to an address on the south side, pulled up in front of a community center. New construction, clean, modern. A sign above the door read, "The Second Chance Center." Below it, smaller text, founded by the Martinez Foundation and the Brennan Redemption Trust. What is this? Victor stared. This is where you work. Maria Martinez used the restitution money to build it. Veterans services, GED programs, job training, addiction counseling. Everything you were doing in prison, you'll do here. Except now you'll actually get paid. TJ grinned. $35,000 a year, no benefits, take it or leave it. I'll take it. They walked inside. The center was impressive. Classrooms, computer labs, a gym, meeting rooms. And in the main classroom, setting up chairs for an evening class, was Elena Cruz. She looked up when they entered. 49 years old now, more gray in her hair than brown. But she still had those same steady eyes, that same unforgiving honesty. You're late, her voice was flat. Class starts in 20 minutes. Victor stood frozen. What are you doing here? I volunteer, teach first aid and basic medical skills. TJ asked me to help with the veteran health programs. She set down the last chair. I also agreed to supervise your community service hours. 200 hours required as part of your parole. I figured I'd make sure you actually do the work. You don't have to. I know I want to. Elena crossed her arms. You asked me 8 years ago why I kept saving you. I told you it was my oath. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. She walked closer. The whole truth is that I saw something in you that day in the penthouse, when you were dying and scared and finally being honest about who you'd become. I saw the man you could be if you chose to change, and I wanted to see if you'd actually do it, if you'd follow through. She stopped a few feet away. You did. 12 years, no backsliding, no excuses, just the work. That's rare, Victor. People talk about changing all the time. Almost no one actually does it, but you did. I had good teachers. Victor looked at her, really looked. You never gave up on me, even when you should have. I'm a medic. We don't give up on patients. Elena's voice softened. Even the difficult ones. TJ cleared his throat. I'm going to go check on the office setup. You two should talk. He left quickly, too quickly, like he'd planned this. Victor and Elena stood in the empty classroom. 12 years of separation between them. 12 years of him in prison. 12 years of her saving lives in her clinic. They'd both changed. Both been weathered by time and choices and the hard work of being better. I'm not asking you to wait for me. Victor's voice was quiet. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that you changed my life, saved it, gave me a reason to be better, and I'll spend the rest of my days trying to be worthy of that. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. I didn't wait. Waiting implies passivity. I watched. I read your parole reports. I talked to the warden. I verified that you were doing the work. And I made a choice, not because I was waiting, but because I wanted to. She stepped closer. You're not the man who kidnapped me. You're not the crime boss. You're not the arrogant king who thought he was untouchable. You're something else now. Someone who faced consequences, who did the work, who earned a second chance. What does that mean? Victor barely dared to ask. It means we start here, as colleagues, as people who respect each other's work. And in 6 months, if you're still showing up, still doing the work, still being the man you are right now, then we see where things go. No guarantees, no promises, just possibility. I can work with possibility. Good. Elena picked up her tablet. Now come on. We have 15 students showing up in 10 minutes. Veterans who need help transitioning. Young men who made mistakes. People who deserve the same chance you got. Time to do the work. Victor followed her to the front of the classroom. They set up materials, wrote the lesson plan on the board, and when the students started arriving, Victor saw himself in every face. Young men who'd served and come home broken, who'd made bad choices, who needed someone to show them that it wasn't too late. That change was possible. That redemption could be earned. The class began. Victor introduced himself. No hiding, no lying. My name is Victor Brennan. 12 years ago, I was a crime boss. I hurt people, destroyed lives, killed innocent civilians through my arrogance. I went to prison, served my time. And now I'm here to teach you that you don't have to be what you were, that you can choose different, that it's never too late to become someone worth being. The students listened, some skeptical, some hopeful, some just desperate for any kind of guidance. Victor knew the feeling, had been all three at different points. I can't promise this will be easy. Victor kept his voice level, honest. Change is hard. Facing consequences is hard. Building something after you've destroyed everything is hard. But hard doesn't mean impossible. It just means you have to do the work, every day, every decision. Choose the right thing even when the wrong thing is easier. He looked at Elena. She nodded. Approval, support, partnership. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, not because she'd forgiven him, but because he'd earned the chance to try. The class continued for 2 hours. Victor taught GED prep. Elena taught basic first aid. TJ joined them halfway through, talking about job placement programs and housing assistance. The students took notes, asked questions, started to believe that maybe they could be different too. When the class ended, students lingered, talking to Victor and Elena and TJ about their situations, their struggles, their fears. This was the work. Not glamorous, not powerful, just present, just showing up and doing what needed doing, every day, for as long as it took. 6 months passed in the rhythm of teaching and healing and slow redemption. Victor taught 4 classes a week, logged his community service hours, met with his parole officer every Friday, attended mandatory counseling sessions where he talked about his choices and his victims and the long process of becoming someone new. He lived in a small apartment 3 blocks from the center, walked to work every morning, came home every night. Simple, quiet, real. Elena was there, every Tuesday and Thursday, teaching her classes, supervising his work. They had coffee after sessions sometimes, talked about their students, about the work, about anything except what might be growing between them, taking it slow, earning it. TJ brought his family to visit one Saturday. His wife Sarah, a social worker he'd met through the reentry program. Their daughter Maria, 4 years old now, bright and fearless. She ran to Victor without hesitation. "Grandpa Vic," she threw her arms around his legs. Victor looked at TJ, the younger man shrugged, smiling. "She asked what to call you. I said you were like family. She decided that meant Grandpa." Victor knelt down, looked at this child who carried Kevin Martinez's name and didn't know the weight of it. "Hey there, Maria. You been good for your mom and dad." "Uh-huh, Daddy says you teach people. Can you teach me?" "What do you want to learn?" "How to be brave." Victor's throat tightened. He looked at TJ, then back at Maria. "You're already brave, kiddo. You just have to remember it when things get scary. Can you do that?" "That's high." She ran off to explore the center. TJ sat down next to Victor. "You doing okay, boss?" "Better than I have any right to be." Victor watched Maria play. "You've built something good here, TJ, a real family, a real life." "So can you." TJ's voice was quiet. "Elena's been asking about you, casual questions, but I see how she looks at you when you're teaching, like she's waiting to see if the man she hoped you'd become is real. And I think she's figured out he is." That evening, after everyone had left, Victor and Elena were alone in the classroom, cleaning up, stacking chairs, the familiar rhythm of closing down for the night. "Maria's beautiful." Elena's voice broke the comfortable silence. "She has Kevin's smile, from the photos his widow showed me." TJ named her after Mrs. Martinez, wanted to honor what she lost, what we all lost. "That was good of him." Elena paused. "You've been doing good work here, Victor. The students love you. You have a gift for teaching." "It's not a gift, it's debt, paying back what I took." "Maybe it started that way, but I've watched you. You're not teaching out of guilt anymore. You're teaching because you're good at it, because you care about these kids." She set down the last chair. "That's different." Victor turned to face her. "You said 6 months. It's been 6 months. I'm still showing up, still doing the work, still being who I am." "I know." "So where do we go from here?" Elena crossed the classroom, stood in front of him, close enough that he could see the gray in her hair, the lines around her eyes, the evidence of a life spent in service. She was 49 years old. He was 61. They weren't young, weren't starting fresh. They were 2 weathered people who'd survived their own separate wars and found each other in the aftermath. "We go slow." Her voice was soft. "We have dinner. We talk. We see if what we think we're feeling is real or just gratitude and proximity. And if it's real, then we see where it goes. One day at a time, one choice at a time, the same way you've been doing everything else. Victor reached out, tentative, gave her every chance to pull away. She didn't. His hand found hers. Calloused palm against calloused palm. Two people who'd spent their lives working. I'd like that. His voice was rough with emotion. I'd like that very much. Elena squeezed his hand. Good, Saturday night. There's a diner 2 blocks from here. Nothing fancy, just coffee and conversation. I'll be there. She smiled, small, real. Then she let go of his hand and picked up her bag. Lock up when you leave. I'll see you Saturday. She left. Victor stood alone in the empty classroom. 61 years old, gray-haired, scarred, a felon on parole, living in a small apartment on $35,000 a year, teaching GED classes to kids who'd made the same mistakes he had. This was his life now. This was everything. And for the first time since he could remember, that was enough. More than enough. Victor turned off the lights, locked the doors, walked home through the Chicago night. The same city where he'd built an empire. The same city where he'd lost his soul. The same city where he'd found it again, piece by piece, through the slow, unglamorous work of just being better. Tomorrow he'd teach another class, help another student, take another step on the long road of redemption. And Saturday, he'd have coffee with a woman who'd saved his life and then saved it again by refusing to let him waste it. The king had fallen, but in his place something better had emerged. Something real, something human, something worth being. Victor Brennan had been untouchable once, powerful, feared. He'd built an empire on suffering and believed he was above consequences. Then he'd learned what everyone learns eventually. That gravity applies to everyone. That pride really does come before the fall, that no one is untouchable. Everyone bleeds, everyone breaks, everyone faces the weight of their choices eventually. The question was what you did after you fell, whether you stayed down or got back up, whether you accepted accountability or made excuses, whether you did the work or just talked about doing it. Victor had chosen the work. 12 years in prison, 78 men taught, a life rebuilt from nothing. And on the other side, waiting, was the possibility of something real, something earned, something that couldn't be taken away because it wasn't based on power or fear or reputation. It was based on choices, on showing up, on being better today than yesterday. That was enough. That was everything. And that was the truest victory Victor Brennan had ever known. As your narrator, I have to ask, Victor Brennan spent 12 years in prison teaching 78 men to read. Maria Martinez, whose husband he killed, supported his parole. Does that earn redemption, or are some crimes unforgivable regardless of transformation? I've narrated hundreds of stories, but this one challenged me. At 48, Victor chose accountability over power. Most men his age double down on ego. He didn't. What would you do? Face 18 years to become better, or fight to stay free? Drop your thoughts below. No wrong answers here, just honest perspectives from people who have lived enough to understand complexity. Subscribe if you want more stories that respect your intelligence. Next week, a father's last chance to save his son from the path he created.